Mention the name SNK to most gamers and they will probably think of the Neo Geo system. Although this was developed by SNK in 1990, the company had already been active for 12 years by this point and had had a number of hits on their hands. 2018 marks the 40th anniversary of the company's 1978 inception, and to celebrate, NIS America have released the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection, featuring a selection of arcade and console games from the company's library between the years of 1981 and 1989. So in the years before Metal Slug and the King of Fighters series, what did SNK have to offer? I'm Glen for SwitchUp, thank you to NIS America for this review copy, and now, let's find out. The games included are Alpha Mission, Athena, Crystalis, Guerrilla War, Ikari Warriors, Ikari Warriors 2, Ikari 3, Iron Tank, P.O.W, Prehistoric Isle, Psycho Soldier, Street Smart, SNK 3 and Vanguard. Alpha Mission is a vertical shoot 'em up that was originally released in 1985. Athena is a platform game released in 1986 and is inspired by Greek mythology. Crystalis, or Godslayer as it was known in Japan, is an action RPG that was released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1990 and has become a bit of a cult classic over the years. Guerrilla War is a top-down run and gun that was released in 1987. The Ikari trilogy, consisting of Ikari Warriors, Ikari Warriors 2 Victory Road and Ikari 3 The Rescue are all included. These are again top-down run and guns, although the third entry sees you relying more on hand-to-hand combat. Iron Tank is a top-down vehicle shooter that was again released on the NES, coming out originally in 1988. P.O.W is a side-scrolling beat-em-up that hit arcades in 1988 and received an NES conversion in 1989. Prehistoric Isle is a horizontal shoot 'em up featuring biplanes and dinosaurs. Psycho Soldier is the second platformer on this collection and is a sequel of sorts to Athena. Street Smart is a one-on-one fighting game, but interestingly is set on a 3D plane, more akin to beat-em-ups. SNK 3 is the second top-down vehicle shooter on this compilation, and finally there is Vanguard, a scrolling shooter and the earliest of SNK's games to make it onto this compilation, releasing in arcades in 1981. Although on the face of it, it may not seem as if there is much variety in the number of genres included, some of the games of the same genre do play quite differently from one another. For example, Prehistoric Isle moves on a horizontal plane and features weapon upgrades that can be placed around your biplane. Alpha Mission is a vertical shoot 'em up, and Vanguard sees your ship travelling down a twisting tunnel, having to destroy enemies in order to replenish your ship's fuel. Each game is available in both their North American and Japanese regional versions, and will have minor differences between them. One of the most interesting takes place in Guerrilla War, whereas in the American version the two characters are unspecified soldiers. In the Japanese version you play as revolutionaries, Che Guevara or Fidel Castro. As well as the different regional versions included, the best thing about this anthology, at least in my opinion, is that for a large proportion of the games, as well as having the arcade original, you also have a console version for the game too. As far as I can see, the console version included is always that of the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's really interesting playing the arcade version of a game and then trying the NES version to see how they differ, and how SNK attempted to port an arcade game to much more primitive hardware. Each game has the option to increase or decrease the difficulty, as well as choosing the number of lives or continues that you want. Save states are available too, and you can also rewind the game for a short while, enabling you to undo any mistake that you may have made and try to avoid the fate that you suffered the first time around. Finally, there is the watch feature. What looks initially like just an option to watch a playthrough of each game becomes a little more when you realise that you can press the plus button at any point and start playing, meaning that you can resume control at any point in the game, skipping any parts that you find difficult. Aside from these quality of life features, the games are presented as they were when originally released, meaning that any slowdown or sprite flicker that these games suffered from back then is present in this version too. This is mostly prominent on the NES console versions of the games, as you would probably expect, and it will depend on each individual if they like their old games to be re-released in this preserved state, or whether you would have preferred a little polishing up to have occurred here too. It's hard to escape the fact that even though there are around 20 games on this anthology, not including the Japanese versions, this of course includes 2 versions of the same game a lot of the time, being the arcade and the console version. There are also only a small pool of genres, as already mentioned. However, fear not, as a free update due in December will add another 11 arcade games to the collection, giving the package a serious shot in the arm. Finally, there is the fact that a large majority of these games are available to play in local multiplayer, so grab a mate, load up the Japanese version of Guerrilla War and decide which of you gets to be Che Guevara. Gameplay receives 16 out of 20. In terms of the graphics, there are a whole host of styles on show. This is understandable when you consider that the games on this compilation span a period of about 10 years and also contain both arcade and console versions. Some of the games, such as Ikari 3, Street Smart or P.O.W, go for huge sprites with very bright colour palettes and still look very impressive to this day. Others look much more simple with smaller sprites such as Athena, and the earlier games, Vanguard in particular, are understandably starting to show their age. It's great seeing some true 8-bit games as opposed to the retro inspired ones that are so prominent these days. It really is fascinating to see the difference between the arcade and console versions of certain games, and console exclusives Crystalis and SNK 40th hold a certain charm to this day, but as already mentioned, you will notice some flicker and slowdown in some of the more manic console games. There are a few options to add filters to the screen, as well as choosing to stretch the image to fit the screen should you wish. You can also add or remove the borders too. One of the main features though is the museum feature, which has a variety of art and promotional material as well as a whole host of information on the golden age of SNK. At the risk of sounding a little greedy, it would be nice if some of this was in documentary form as opposed to the slideshow of information, but it's an interesting read nonetheless, and it's more than some anniversary anthologies include, to be fair. In terms of the audio, the soundtracks are fairly solid across most games, with some games including digitised speech. Psycho Soldier, for example, has a song that plays throughout the whole level. It does sound a little bit tinny these days, but it's a nice inclusion for a game that's over 30 years old now. The NES games have that classic chiptune sound, and the game also includes a section dedicated to each game's soundtrack, where you can listen to each track individually or even shuffle them up. Graphics receive 14 out of 20 and audio receives 13 out of 20. The controls for all the games are very simple to use. Pressing the L button allows you to use the rewind feature, while pressing the minus button brings up the save state menu, and you can also access the filters from here too. One interesting thing to note about the controls is that on all of the arcade top-down run and guns, you can use both sticks on the controller to serve as character movement and weapon aiming, much like you would have done with twin rotary sticks in the arcade. In the console versions of these games, you can't, and you must instead use a control scheme more akin to which you would have used on an NES controller, with movement and gun aim being handled with one stick or, of course in true NES fashion, the D-pad. Controls receive 17 out of 20. The SNK 40th Anniversary Collection costs £35.99 or $39.99 on the eShop and is available in physical form too. Had the collection as it stands at the moment been the final offering, then even to a retro enthusiast like me, it would have been a bit of a tough sell. Whilst there are classics such as the Ikari series and guilty pleasures such as Prehistoric Isle, and that's before you even mention an NES classic in Crystalis, the lack of variety would have been a bit of a sticking point. However, when you factor in the free update that is coming, which increases the number of games available, as well as the quality of life features added and an interesting museum feature, then it starts to become an easier deal to swallow. Having said that, I have already seen the physical version available for £10 less than the eShop price, and would urge anyone interested to explore this route and save yourself a few quid. Value gets 15 out of 20. To conclude, the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection does a good job of highlighting the golden age of the company and includes a good range of games that for the most part have aged quite well and include local multiplayer. While the price for the current lineup is a little high, the upcoming free update is a good sweetener, and the inclusion of both arcade and console versions, although on the one hand means a bit of repetition in the lineup, is also a quite intriguing way to remind us of what arcade games used to look like when they were ported onto home systems. These games are still a lot of fun to play today, and the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection gets a SwitchUp score of 75%. Thank you all very much for watching. Please remember to leave a like if you like what you've just watched. And talking of watching, you can now watch us on the Switch of course with the new YouTube update that's just been added to the eShop. How's that for a slice of fried gold? Let us know down in the comments some of your favourite arcade games from the 80s and 90s, and as always, happy gaming.